Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. Today we are talking about something that I like to talk about because it's such a huge aspect of our hormone health, and yet it is overlooked or maybe kind of pushed to the side when we talk about hormones. Everyone wants to jump onto estrogen and progesterone, but before we get there, there's all kinds of things that are impacting other hormones like insulin and cortisol, our stress hormone. So today's guest is going to be talking about anxiety and stress and how this impacts your body in multiple ways that we haven't even covered on the podcast before. So I'm super excited to talk about it today. My guest is Rachelle McCloud, who is a mental health therapist and emotional wellness coach. Through years of successfully helping clients move their anxiety, depression, and trauma disorders into remission, she's developed a program that empowers people to skillfully get rid of symptoms and heal. She's also the facilitator of the Facebook group Releasing the Baggage of Anxiety, Depression, and Traumatic Stress, where she delivers free training on leading interventions that work well for getting rid of symptoms, not just coping or managing them. Her mission is to empower people to do their healing work effectively, safely, and skillfully. You can find out more at her website, rachelmccloud.com. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. As I mentioned, I love this topic and I love getting different views of it. And I think it's, even what was just said in your bio, you're not trying to just teach people how to cope, but actually
Right.
how to heal it, right? So let's start with maybe, breaking down just kind of the basics of anxiety, how the body handles it, how the brain handles it for people that don't know.
Yeah. Gosh, I love this topic. I don't enjoy anxiety at all, but it's really fascinating how, um, you know, if you think about our body as a sensing organ, it's like receiving all this information from outside of us and within us. And then it sends all the information up to the front of the brain to make
Mm-hmm.
sense of our world and give it words and understanding and insights. And all these things that are very necessary for us to create accurate maps of the world, accurate reactions, accurate responses, and then really to put our best self forward into it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's really
Mm-hmm.
how it's designed to work. However, all the positive emotions just flow through this process. It flows through the mind body connection, flows through up the brainstem, past the survival system, and up to the front of the brain because there's no threat involved. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have all these other emotions that are in that's emotion that is vital to understanding the world, but they are not as positive,
Mm-hmm.
right? They
Mm-hmm.
register in the brain as pain,
Mm-hmm.
social pain, emotional pain, mental pain, and relational pain. And that stuff registers, it alerts the pain neurons in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts ringing those, right? The little alarms ring. And then that starts triggering the survival system to interpret that we're under attack.
Mm-hmm.
We're in danger. And so all of a sudden we shift out of a processing state and into a survival state. And that survival state is where we will have that amped up adrenaline, cortisol,
Mm-hmm.
all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And where we'll experience that fight or flight, freeze, faint, or fawn. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's
All the additional F's that haven't been talked about for a long
yeah.
time, right? Yeah, there's a
Right.
lot of,
And when we're there, that's not a choice center. When that survival system takes over, we don't get choices. And then we're like, why
right,
am I behaving like this? Why can't I control any of this? You're not supposed to,
right,
right?
right.
We're under an automatic program for our survival that has done a pretty good job
Mm-hmm.
keeping us
Mm-hmm.
alive for, thousands and tens and thousands of years.
Right.
And so it's designed to work like this, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it's no longer accurate, right? We're no
Mm-hmm.
longer being chased by lions and tigers,
Mm-hmm.
and being, hurting somebody's feelings. It doesn't mean you're going to get kicked out of the tribe anymore, and you're
Right.
going to be left to fend for yourself.
Right.
And there's just different pieces here where we don't need to be under survival states like we are.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, but the system, so when that pain starts moving, we're likely to go into a survival state. But the system's also designed that if you can send messages to the survival system that, hey, we're safe,
Mm-hmm.
we're okay, the survival system will join back in with the
Mm.
body and the mind, and it'll go back into a whole brain state and really process the energy that's moving.
Mm.
So all that
Interesting.
pain energy gets to be converted, and
Mm-hmm.
actually the brain will take out the pain and really convert that into amazing things like hope and courage and joy. Like pain is not supposed to, emotional pain, once it gets past that, those pain neurons, it really gets converted into beautiful things.
Mm.
And so, but also it's information. All of a sudden we have all this information about what's going on in the world outside of us, what's going on inside of us. We're getting accurate data. We're getting the light and the dark. We're getting the good and the bad. We're getting all of the pieces. And that way we can come together and create something very accurate. So we're helping the brain really understand what's going on here. And so there's just beautiful opportunity in here, but a lot of us have lost the art of bringing the survival system back together.
Right.
And so here it's out there to the left, creating all these symptoms for us when we can just very quickly bring it back. But the survival system is much different than the front of our brain, which, that's the native language there is talking and explaining and understanding and venting and all these things. But just because we do those things does not mean our survival system has agreed to come back to the party. Now, right?
He's still like hanging out at the door being like, okay, we're not trying to let you in. Yeah.
And so really when we can shift this and start really addressing that in the native language of the survival system is the body, its whole job is to keep the body alive. So all of a sudden, if we start doing the things we did with babies, like rocking, hugging, sucking our thumb. We don't want to do that as adults, though.
At least not in public.
Not in public. But many of us still have some of these coping strategies because they actually work. They are targeted to that part of the brain, and that part of the brain does not evolve. So, now we're using interventions like EMDR, thought-field therapy. We're using some tapping and meridian interventions. We're using all these mind-body things, not to mention some of the chemical stuff and the hormone stuff to really start talking to that survival system to get it to cool out and join the party, join the healing party. And so, gosh, I've said so many things. Ultimately, what's really great here is that when our system has learned to create anxiety and we can provide it support to, hey, let's do something different, all of a sudden it really shifts and it changed and those symptoms stop. And then the whole brain comes together and say, hey, why were we doing that in the first place? Let's do something better. And they kind of get together up there and then they write new codes. And the next thing you know, that spider that may have made you freak out no longer does, right? That look that someone gave you that says you're in trouble no longer is bothering you. Right. That look that your husband pulling away for a night because he's stressed out no longer is causing you like to melt down and like I'm being abandoned. Right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're just accurately understanding there's some good and bad here. Let's work through it. And we're becoming more whole.
Yeah. So do you think that you have to go through processing old trauma in order for that to happen? Or are there ways to not have to necessarily figure out where, the trauma might be, the anxiety might be connected to the trauma? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think I hear you saying this. Do we have to go back and talk about the trauma?
Right. Or even know the trauma, I guess, because sometimes there's traumas that we don't necessarily know. Right.
I'd say no, unless you need to. And it's like, it's more, I look at this as like what I help the brain do the healing work it needs to do. Right? And it does not need to talk through things to heal things. Right. It does not need to understand things to heal things because the mind and body are always trying to heal. That's actually what a lot of symptoms of anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress are. It's the mind body system trying to heal and it's not completing the process. That survival system said, nope, we're out. And it doesn't, and that can override the healing pathways in a second. So all of a sudden here, so I find that people do need to go back and resolve traumas, but it doesn't, it's like a 20-minute process. Right. The mind-body connection that's an electrical process that all of a sudden, if the survival system comes together with it, it happens quickly. So we can process some really painful memories so fast that where the brain learned tons of incorrect beliefs about ourselves, where our subconscious mind has stored all sorts of brain trash, ultimately, or misunderstandings or things that thought it was important, but it was not, or things that were for other people that they projected onto us and we took them in to mean something about ourselves. We can go back to those moments and then the brain the subconscious mind can run that stuff through the healing pathways and really solve problems, because our body is not a problem solving organ in emotionally, and right. mind can't solve problems. They have to move this stuff to the parts of the brain that can solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so that process has to complete.
Yeah, that makes
We
sense.
don't get health and wellness without completing. Just like when we make hormones, right? Back in the chemical world, it's like we have to make the hormones, then we have to use them, and then we have to break them down, and then we have to release them, right?
Yep, get them out.
Otherwise, problems happen. It's the same thing with events that have happened in our life. If we don't complete the process for them, we will have problems.
That makes sense.
We will see old anxieties showing up, and we're like, what's up with this? Well, that's old stuff that hasn't made it through yet. So let's just help it complete, because it's here now and it's trying to make its way through. So let's just finish that.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite approaches? I know you mentioned EMDR before, and what is your, I guess, process with helping things complete?
Yeah, I really use I was going to say it very complicatedly. Nerd brain over here.
It's all good. Yeah.
I might still do that.
Yeah, no problem.
These interventions, I really target the survival system, because that's the part of the brain that will determine whether something will complete or never complete.
Right.
And so really any intervention that will help the survival system receive the message that it's safe to let this stuff through, and then it actually responds by joining the team, and the system resolves, that's what I'm going to use. And so my favorite interventions for that are, I like this one called collarbone breathing. It's part of thought field therapy, which is the original tapping intervention. But the first intervention I love to teach people is EFT techniques, and tapping. It's so easy. There's no negative side effects.
Yep.
You can do it wrong and you still get great results.
Right. Absolutely.
It's a no-brainer, right? It's like, and most survival systems are like, yes, let's do this. I hear you. I'm responding. We're safe. Let's go. And so I love that one. I do also use EMDR. I'm really starting to use passive EMDR approaches, and I'm really starting to train clients on that and see how that impacts the whole process. My process is designed to help people resolve disorders in 2 to 6 months instead of 2 to 6 years. That's not the right path. That's not the right timing for everyone. But I really, I'm like, I will move as fast as the brain is ready to move. Yeah. They can resolve things really quickly. So I've been really adding that in, especially with my clients with complex PTSD, which is where I'll have them listen to EMDR music, or wear some tactile buzzy, like some tactile bilateral alternating stimulation during the day, and just help keep their brain in a whole brain state. And so I like to match people with the right intervention for their system.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So when I'm working with, I have an online self-study program, and I teach 4 strategies, 4 interventions there, and have them play with it.
And figure out which works best for them. Yeah.
Yes. And then they can kind of get a before and after the intervention, which the interventions are like 30 seconds or 2 minutes. Right. And so when they can see how their brain is able to resolve issues or stressors just in a very short time. And if they get any resolution, then that means that their survival system is listening. Yeah. Is paying attention, is responding. And so that's one they keep in their toolbox, and then they can go do, and then I teach exercises and things like that. That is like, okay, take your tool and help your brain resolve this issue. Yeah. And you can do it like this. And so I show how to do that, and then set people to work on that. But when I'm working with people, we'll start with EFT, emotional freedom techniques, and we'll pick a stressor and try it out. If it reduces the intensity of the anxiety, or maybe the stomach ache, or the headache, or any of the symptoms that can come up the body has, and any of that, then that becomes their intervention, one of theirs. Yeah. And if it doesn't do anything, great. Now we know. Let's try the next one. And so
I like that. Yeah.
And I love the collarbone breathing next. And if that one doesn't, we're just keep going. But I really, between EFT and collarbone breathing, that covers 100% of my clients. My clients either love one or the other. And then any of the other ones are just add-on goodness.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's funny. I was taught EFT the first time, I think in my 20s. And it was interesting because in the beginning I was pretty resistant to it. I was just like, whatever, and then it kind of over time, I noticed it helping more. Now it really, really helps me, like I had a really stressful week last week. And I mean, I was just tapping like crazy because it was the only thing that was just leveling me out, and I love that tool, and I teach it in my program too, because it is so you can do it on your own. You can't do it wrong, as you mentioned. I feel for me, a lot of times I'll start tapping and the stuff that's underneath will just come up and out, right? I'm like, I start with sort of what's at the forefront, of what I'm experiencing, but then it'll be amazing. Like something will come up from childhood or whatever. It's like the peeling of the layers, Yeah. And I think that it's so powerful. Yeah.
And you can see that right now we're having experience, but it's like there's richer reasons why.
Yep.
Like this is like our brain is not just choosing crappy strategies. No, it really thinks this is how it's supposed to be done. And it will tell you exactly, well, I think so, because remember when this happened?
Yeah.
And like you said, we don't have to get into the story to help the system heal. But sometimes it really, when I'm working with a disorder, I'm not just looking at getting rid of symptoms. I'm looking at also creating function. There's some things that we have not been able, the functions we haven't been able to create yet. Like for instance, if we had a parent with mental illness, a lot of children learn how to pay very good attention to the parent, but not themselves.
Yeah.
So their internal wiring goes first to the parent and, bypassing the self. Well, we need to restore the function of the self becoming involved in this process and life becoming about you and you mattering and yourself being the driver of your life. Right. And so when we're using tapping and stuff like that, sometimes it's really good to know the story because you're learning about yourself. You're gathering information about yourself. You're seeing that your brain is not just being an a-hole.
You can say it. It's fine. We call it what it is here.
But it's like there's a real issue and it's actually trying to help.
Yeah.
And then you say, oh, honey, that is just not helping us,
Yep.
And then all of a sudden your brain is able to, it's like when you're working, like if you took your car to the mechanic and they're like, oh yeah, I think it's this from the outside, they wouldn't be able to fix it.
Right.
It's like, you need to get under there. You need to look at you need to get close to it, look at it. And then the mechanic's like, oh, I know what to do.
What's up?
And a lot of times with tapping, it's like, or any of these interventions, you're helping the brain get close like that. That pain that covers that issue keeps the brain out of it. Like every time it's touched, the survival system takes you out and goes into a different. And so your other part of your brain is like, but we need that information.
Yeah.
We need in there and it can't get in there because the pain. And so you're tapping and the tapping is helping the brain process that pain. And so it's taking it out. And so your healing team can touch more of the problem. And all of a sudden you're getting, it's like using that screwdriver and you're getting that wet piece out of the way and this piece out of the way. And then it's like, all of a sudden you're looking at this problem and you're like, oh, and then you're tapping there, looking at this problem for maybe 30 seconds. And then you notice, oh, and the new ideas, epiphanies, healings, like, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love people to have those moments because it's how the self begins to trust the self again. How the self learns to see the self again and that it's safe to see the self. And hey, there's something good behind that pain. And then we stop becoming so afraid of the pain anymore. And then we start to get curious and then we start to get, well, what if I could move that pain? What would I get then?
Yeah.
And it's like, personally, I'm at a point in I have a childhood history of, complex trauma
I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like we go on the path that we're doing the healing of ourselves first. Yeah.
And I come from a family of generational trauma. And so I didn't build this to build a curriculum for anybody else. I built this because I needed it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and I've been working this journey for a long time and helping other people, but I'll tell you what, I don't enjoy being deeply triggered. And every once in a while I am.
Sure.
I am like triggered hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something will happen, especially in intimate with my husband. Like he'll say something and boom.
Yep. Out of nowhere.
Feel all the things.
Yeah.
And feel too many things. And then I'm like, interesting, something's happening here. And I'll tap with that or use whichever intervention I want to at the time.
Yep. And
gosh, I just feel like I'm getting the gift of myself back. Like there's some part of me that was in so much excruciating pain that I could not find, see, or touch. And now all of a sudden she is no longer in pain. And like, there's this whole reunion. I did not get in this to do like internal parts work or internal child healing. I didn't. And now here I am.
The child always comes in at some point, right? What are you going to do? They're in there like, please love me.
Talk about, and the antidote for self-hatred is like, get your system to just process that out. And then
Mm.
all of a sudden it's like that self-hatred gets converted into this just information and understanding and compassion and
Yeah.
self-love, really.
Yeah.
And then it's like you just get to look at yourself with these new eyes. So
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. No, I think it's you put it in such a beautiful way, right? And I think a lot of women listening to this, are struggling. I see at least a lot of women that are struggling on a lot of levels. Obviously, they come to me mostly for hormone support or gut support, but trauma underlies
Yes.
so many of our physical issues, right? I mean, I've seen it again and again. They do, they eat the right way, they take the right supplements, they do the movement, all of that, and things aren't getting better because we have this trauma hanging out, still running the show,
Yes.
And so this is why I like to focus on this area and to normalize it for
Yes.
everyone that we all have trauma. Like there's just no way around it, right? I mean, we have, I'm sure you've heard this term before, but the big T traumas and then the little T traumas, but the little T traumas can be just as impactful
Yes.
on our health as those big T traumas, so and things that you don't even know from your childhood that happen. And so I love EFT in particular, and I'm so loving that you teach other things that people can do on their own, because that's the thing, is hitting that moment, right? Like you just said, when you got triggered, immediately you're able to have this tool that is going to literally not only help you process it, but it's going to calm down your
Yes.
cortisol. It's gonna, it's gonna,
Instantly, almost.
yes,
Which
yes,
is crazy
yes, exactly.
and
Because
awesome and
that is such, once we get those hormones going, sometimes, like, unless we get in there, they're going to be going. And,
yes.
the thing about trauma and cortisol is that if you have this trauma you haven't dealt with, it can keep your cortisol high all the time. Right.
Yes.
And we don't want that.
And
We
it can
definitely
run
don't want
on
that.
such unconscious levels.
Yes.
The brains are only going to be conscious of stuff for so long, and then it's like, you know what, this is here.
Yep.
Let's just
Tune
start
about.
filtering
Yep.
it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of how we survive. But that doesn't mean it's not running through your nervous system continually.
Right.
And
Right.
as somebody who I did an intervention one time. I teach this one for dissociation now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 40, so 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm moving my eyes. I'm finished. I'm moving the other ways. And while I'm moving back, I see this woman's fingertips so close. And I'm like, I don't think I have ever been this present ever in my
Wow.
entire life.
Wow.
And as a therapist, right, I'm like, this proves that we can be in some level of dissociated state for
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, how does this happen? And you mean to tell me? Yes. So yes, your life might get better more by just processing some trauma
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I've had some times where I like to walk with compulsions when you can find them, and walk with them and use these interventions. And all of a sudden the brain finally can get a good enough look at it to say, hey, what is this doing here? And I'm like, yeah, I know, right? So we're here, and then it processes it, and then there's this quiet inside. And that's what my clients are saying. They're like, I don't know if to do the silence. I'm like,
they're like, I've never experienced this before in my life. Right.
One of my clients was like, there's a nice voice in my head.
Where did that come from?
That's supposed to be there.
Yep.
That inner criticism is the sign of wounding.
Yeah. Are a lot of your clients coming to you with, do they feel like it's anxiety from work mostly, or anxiety from families, or I guess I'm wondering if a lot of people come in with the idea of anxiety from something sort of happening in their life right now versus it being old things that aren't processed.
I get a wide variety of people. I get people that have been working on their childhood trauma for decades. And they've been talking it out, and they've been like, and it's just, I need to make it
enough talk.
And I'm like, let's
right.
go.
Right. It's just like the hamster wheel is, we're done.
Those ones zip through this.
Yeah.
Right. I have clients who they're like, I don't know. I just have a problems. And it's like, okay, let's go. And so, and they're like, this is anxiety. Yep. This is anxiety. This right here. When this happens, when you're feeling this, that sounds like it's dissociation, or like we're giving names to this blur and buzz of static in
Yeah.
their brain almost,
Yeah.
or swirling.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is this symptom. This is, and then we're helping the brain resolve them one at a time, right? And so
Hmm.
that it's
Hmm.
not just a big blur of things.
Yep.
Um, and then I'll have clients that come because they just need the panic or whatever to stop now. And so that some of them, so that is, so we'll do that work. A lot
Hmm.
of times, they're surprised to find that their childhood that they thought was good is the culprit, which I hear them.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like that was me. Like, I'm like, we put on some pretty big mental filters
Yeah. Yep.
to survive.
Yep.
Right. And so sometimes there's, and I have people that have great backgrounds that just have, some stuff that their brain wasn't able to process, which is normal. Not
Mm-hmm.
all, there's a lot of energies to run, a lot. There's self-hatred, there's jealousy, there's, like, you as humans, we got to be good at all of these. And some in our family systems, like, we're not good at anger. Like, you can have all the emotions but not anger. Well, that's going to cause some problems.
Right.
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 So we'll get in there and get their brain good at doing the anger, and then we'll get in there and do the backlog of anger work, and out they're running, they're moving forward. It's really the people that come with presenting symptoms that
Hmm.
want to resolve, we do that. But then if they have histories of childhood trauma, these are happening because there's usually several systems that have never been built. Like,
Hmm.
we're these babies, we come in here with all the wiring, but our parents are supposed to wire that for us
And that doesn't
by
happen because they're
teaching
not,
them
they've got their
what it
own
is.
stuff.
But
Yep.
if that never happened for them, they won't know how to do it for us, right? And
Right.
so we come into adulthood with all this undone work, all the materials there. It just has to be wired. It just
Yeah.
has, the brain has to get a chance to fire it and wire it.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
And so that's some of the work that we do. And so it's like, yes, we're going to resolve symptoms, and so I kind of layer them together because people only have so much stamina. They're not, like, lots of
Yes.
people want to hit this and quit this, right? It's
Yeah.
not like we're going to do several separate layers.
Yep.
It's like, let's put them all together, make it stop, and also get the building going on. So
Yeah,
I get
absolutely.
quite a bit
Well,
of,
as you were talking, I was thinking about, my first experience with therapy was in my 20s, and it was talk therapy. And that was actually the first time that I even recognized I had
yeah,
anxiety,
yeah,
right? Like,
yes,
I literally just thought that this is just the way that
that, yes,
that
me too.
everybody lived. And, not that I even thought about are other people living this way, but I was just like, this is just it. My brain doing this all the time, and so it was such an interesting experience. And I appreciate now, I mean, this was 20 years ago at this point, that other forms of therapy have really evolved to work
Yes,
more with the body and the energy systems and things like that to get at stuff more quickly. Because while I appreciate everything I learned in talk therapy for like 5 years or whatever in my 20s, there was still so much to actually truly, like you said, like, sort of bring all together and process it. It just was more that hamster wheel. So
yeah, I find that it's like, you know let's get it fixed
yeah.
first, and then let's
Yep.
talk about it, because then it's
Mm.
fun. It's like a
Hmm.
past history kind of thing.
Interesting.
Like, let's not sit and just talk and then use an intervention, or then bring the mind and body together, then
Hmm.
bring the survival system back in. Like,
Hmm.
let's do that piece first, and because then it won't be painful. It'll
Yeah.
there's beautiful insights. So it's like, we're kind of looking through, wow, and this is why I did this and this and this. It's like we're watching
Mm.
the brain make all these new connections it's never been able to make.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
I feel like I really hope that um we get this growing more, because the science is behind this. But
Yep.
I would like to see this, the neurological, the neuropsychological pieces happen first,
Hmm.
helping the mind body connection connect and
Hmm.
heal and get strong. Like, we have to have systems that can process fear,
Yeah.
right? But the
Yep.
more if we're experiencing fear and our survival system's jumping out, we're practicing going into survival state with this fear energy, and
Right.
then we're reinforcing that, and it's getting big, and then it's, and then we don't have that ability. So it's like, if we can have a successful practice with fear is coming in and it's moving through the pathways like it's supposed to, it's
Hmm.
practicing that, it's doing that, and brains are supposed to be doing this without our needing to help it so much.
Right.
It's supposed
Right.
to be happening in the back and while we're
Mm.
sleeping, and
Hmm.
those types of things. But so I'd really like to see us do the repair work and wire
First. Yeah.
ourselves, and like do the hardware work
Yeah.
first, and then do the talk therapy. And I think that will liberate talk therapists to do their skills well, and really
Yeah.
be working with brains that function, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you can look at that brain of someone experiencing anxiety and the brain of someone in a calm state, and they are totally different,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know? And so
Hmm.
it's like, that's really what talk therapy is for. It's like that when your whole brain is together and your prefrontal cortex, your thinking center, can think and be
Yep.
rational and explore different options, it can't fight energy with the survival system. Every part of us is going to lose the battle with
Yeah.
fighting for energy with the survival system.
Right.
That's how
Right.
we're designed. And then and then when we lose that battle, we think something's wrong with us, we're not strong enough. No, you can't. We are
Right.
biologically designed not to work like that.
Right. Right. You're
This
like,
is not about you.
you can't fight City Hall. I mean, come on now.
This is not about you. This is not
Yeah.
about how weak you are, how weak willed. Like,
Right.
no, this is brain function.
Right. Right. Right.
And I think that the more we're working with brain function,
Yeah.
the better our results are going to be, and the
Yeah.
less we're going to feel like we're up a failing, losing battle. We're not. We're just
Yeah.
we need to shift our strategies.
Oh yeah. And I've never even thought about how, yeah, how cool that approach is to get the hard wiring in and then talk, right? That you can understand yourself more deeply and appreciate everything that you've been through if
Mm-hmm.
you're not in that painful state going
That's
back
right.
over it. Yeah.
Right.
And,
And
you
I
know,
love
go
that
ahead.
too, because, when people do shift with, because people want specialists, right? I don't do
Yeah.
marriage therapy.
Right.
Uh, I could blow your marriage up. I'm not trained in that.
Yeah. You're
And
like,
so
it's
they
not what I'm
want,
here for.
they want that. And it's like, and they can go in that space. They know how to work with their systems.
Mm,
Pain comes up, right?
right.
They can say, hold on, I need a moment. They
Right.
can use these interventions there, but they're just ready. They're just in a space of ready to absorb and learn.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
We know with kids in school, you can't learn and be in a trauma state at the same time.
Right.
It's not a thing,
Right. Right.
so we want to learn how to do our relationships better and our marriages better, but we're not in a regulated state. We're not in that function.
Right. And you just bringing up kids, I just had this, thought too about how I'm sure a lot of these systems can work much better with kids than the talk
Yes,
therapy approach, right? And unfortunately, we
totally.
live in a time in history where kids are going through a lot,
Yes.
even just going to school and the fears around being in school, much less social media and all these other things. And so being able to do these types of things with them and really get in at that early age, how
That's right.
powerful is that?
Well,
Yeah.
let me tell you how powerful that is. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. Children, they're just, you get to help their system process these big emotions so quickly,
Yep.
and you can provide support to that. Rocking is good for that, but
Yep.
the kids get older and they don't want you to rock them anymore.
Yeah.
But
They're
when
like,
we're
don't touch
rocking
me.
babies, that we're working with their survival system. That's what
Right.
we're doing, right? So,
Right.
but now it's like we have a different way to do that, so we can be tapping on them while we're doing this, or they can be holding the buzzies, and all of a sudden they just shift through it, and
Yeah.
they're just growing and learning, and they're learning how to work with this fear. And so I will have clients come to me, and they come because they need, like, I need solutions for my kid. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
usually children have matching disorders to their parents, right?
Makes
Because the
sense.
parent has wired the child, and the parents
Mm-hmm.
will wire the child the way theirs are, plus mirroring neurons in the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Children are practicing our emotional states.
Mm-hmm.
They're mapping our emotional states. And so it's
Right.
just a fact. So I'm all about, like, let's get your system running well, because
Right.
your child will osmose that. Not really,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
osmosis.
But yeah, but they're
It's the
soaking
neurons,
up
and you're
everything. Yeah.
passing that on to them
Mm-hmm.
through the way that children are created to learn
Mm-hmm.
emotional wellness, through the
Yeah.
parent.
Yeah.
And so, but the other piece is that sometimes my clients can't concentrate because their kid can't fall asleep because they're so anxious, or they're having panic attacks.
Mm,
So then we're using these strategies with I'm equipping them to learn how to work with their kid. All of a sudden their kid's sleeping through the night. They're like, oh
yeah.
my gosh, this works. And then the kids aren't having panic attacks, and the kids are this and that. And now there's room for mom to do her work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now there's room for dad to do his work,
Yeah.
and they're going in and doing it. But what I find, even when I'm working with teenagers, is that they haven't had as many decades to make their anxiety, depression, or trauma disorder as complicated and
Right.
complex as we
Right.
have. And
Right.
so it's like, we do a little bit of work, and it's like those things just come
Really cool.
unraveled.
Yeah.
I
That makes
mean,
sense. Yeah.
no matter how I've had children that I've worked with, teenagers that have spent most of their time institutionalized,
Mm,
and cutting and this and that, and all of a sudden they just, when we can't process emotion, we have to get it out. And
yeah.
whether we're screaming at each other, cutting ourselves, you know,
Yep. It's going to
verbally,
happen some
they
way.
have to.
Yeah.
And all of a
Yeah.
sudden she has a tool to use this stuff, and she doesn't need to do that to her body anymore.
Yeah.
Right? She doesn't have
Amazing.
to sink in depression any longer because
Right.
she can move that pain. And then
Right.
she's getting better and better. And they just, gosh, it's just, it's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just nothing. And so it's really, it's wonderful. And sometimes I'm jealous. I'm
Like, I
telling
want to
you.
go back.
I'm sitting here working through this stuff, but also teaching brain function
Yeah.
and interactions, and all of a sudden they're having these epiphanies I had when I was 30.
Right.
And I'm just like,
You're like, I could have had like 15 more
16,
years. Yep. Yep.
We've
Yep.
been doing this for 2 months. What are you
Yep.
talking about? But yes,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and it's really beautiful when they can do that. And I love it when parents and kids are doing it together.
Together, absolutely. Well, and as you were talking about the sleep issue with kids, I thought about, so many women that come to me struggle with sleep, especially post 40, right? Because our hormones are starting to change. But one of the biggest things, so many women will think, oh, I'm waking up in the middle of the night because I have to pee, or, something like that. But then they're like, oh, I can't go back to sleep. And, a good chunk of the time, it's actually their cortisol is rising in the middle of the night, when it's not supposed to be. And then you're awake, and yeah, you're not going back to sleep when that cortisol is too high and your melatonin has been suppressed, And so this is where the sleep thing comes in so much for our hormones, right? Just like I mean, there's a few things that we really have to focus on when it comes to our hormones, but the circadian rhythm is such a huge, huge part of it, right? Everybody's like, let's look at the menstrual cycle. And I'm like, let's look at the 24 hours that makes up every day of the menstrual cycle to start with, right? So getting good sleep is so important. So here we go again, starting to regulate that cortisol, especially during the day. It's not just that nighttime cortisol it's impacted by your cortisol earlier in the day too. And of course, there's lots of things before bedtime that I recommend to do to, have your cortisol come down and stay down. But again, going back to, if you haven't processed your trauma, those are the things that in the middle of the night, you're going to wake up and be thinking about, on some level, it's not, you're not necessarily going to think about that specific trauma, but how it's playing out in your current life.
Yeah. And there's really, and this is stuff that I teach, but there's some simple strategies to really get your body to tell you what the issue is. And there's simple strategies to get your whole system to tell you which memory this is and when it started, like, to get you to be able to pull up the original memory. It may have happened a bunch of times, but you can get your whole system is so responsive that you can, even though it feels like I'm just anxious, it's like, no, actually you can find which memory this is.
Wow.
And that's just cool and fascinating. But but when, I know nothing about the hormone stuff, like I really stay in my lane over here.
Yeah. No worries.
What I do know about the sleep cycles is that our brain is doing a form of EMDR, which is the rapid eye movement. And it is one of the times for emotional work. And emotional, like, it's processing all this emotional stuff. It's a busy time. Yeah. And so when it can't complete stuff, we wake up with nightmares. We wake up with those stress streams, and it's like it was working on it, but didn't finish. And so I'll have my clients really work with some use an intervention during that time to, maybe you can't get back to sleep. A lot of them do, but maybe you can't get back to sleep, but let's get some of that process, whatever your brain is working on right there. Let's get that process so that tomorrow night it can finish,
Oh yeah.
Because it's struggling, and the brain will always bring into awareness whatever it's struggling with, always. Right. And that's really why we have all this anxiety in our face, because it's like, can I have some help? And then we don't know what we're doing, and we're running from it, and it's chasing us, and it's like, no. And we're like, leave me alone. And we have this internal conflict, and we're divided, and then we're falling. And it's just, and so it's really, I love that when we're doing this, we're bringing people back together with themselves. Right. Absolutely. Is something like EFT, would that work in the middle of the night if somebody can't get back to sleep? Yeah. Some of my clients, that's all they'll use. EFT. And so it doesn't, it's really just, you just need one tool that your survival system listens to. And I have people trial a few because I like it when it works with it fast. Yeah. Right. Yep. We're working with an electrical process, and we should see results. Well, right. So really it's quickly. Like, I'm going to compare a couple and then make some suggestions. Yeah. So it doesn't matter which intervention. It's just, I mean, some people wake up and do breath work. Yep. They're really working with that exhale and holding and they're working with that fight or flight system, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't teach a ton of breath work. I don't teach
Mm-hmm.
any.
You're like, not a
Except for the
ton or
countdown
any.
breathing. I gossip about breath work. But since I'm not trained, it's just gossip.
Yeah.
But it really does work with the mind body system. It is
Yeah.
like we want to work with the body, how the body works with itself,
Yeah.
how the
Yeah.
mind works with itself. And it's using those things to shift us into states of fight
Yep.
or states of relaxation and rest.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
we can assist.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful because it really, yeah, it comes back to the mind body connection when we're talking about hormones, and why I always say to people, we jump into wanting to get our estrogen lower, progesterone higher, all those things. And it's like, until you deal with this stress component that is creating, the anxiety, really stress is anxiety essentially underneath it, right? I mean, we can have good stress, certainly, that can motivate us to do things. But for most people, a lot of stress, when they think about stress, it's anxiety that's underneath it, right? And so that's kicking off this whole hormonal cascade that we don't want to go down that path, and especially time and time again. And so that's
Right.
when you start to see those issues, those
Yeah.
problems start to arise with, heavy periods, PMS, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like, this is where you really, and I keep bringing this up because I want people to understand that are listening, that if you haven't sort of tackled this area and you have period problems, hormone problems, this is the time. This is the
Yeah.
time to jump on it.
And I think this stress issue is really important because like stress is brain food. Like if we actually don't have enough stress, we're not growing, we're stagnant,
Right.
we're moving backwards, the
Right.
brain's concerned, right? And then there's too much stress, which is traumatizing. There's more stress than can be processed right now.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's really what trauma is about. Is it doesn't have to be a big T trauma. It can just be anything the brain hasn't
Yep.
was able to process, right?
Yep.
And that's what a
Mhm.
lot of the little T's are about, is just, and it's like, but this wasn't a big deal. Yeah. And your brain said it's still in there.
Yep. It's
It
still a
hasn't
big deal to
processed
me.
yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, but it's like, we really want to, this process, this mind body connection with the survival system, it's really, it's designed to keep up with all this stuff. And
Mhm.
if the pain level gets too high, it's going to knock off the stress processor. And that means your stress is going to back up.
Mhm.
Right.
Yep.
And when you're in a survival state, you gotta do something mind body to cope. So now
Yeah.
you gotta drink the alcohol,
Yep.
this, the that, and
Yep.
eat the food and all the things to cope. And but
Mhm.
that's not processing.
Right.
So you might be doing all this stuff, but the processing work hasn't been done yet.
Yeah.
And so really when we're processing stress processing, that we're getting that our brain's ability to process the stress, we're growing it, we're maturing it. And
Mhm.
so not only
Mhm.
do we get the benefit of processing the stress, but our brain gets better at it. Our whole mind body system gets better
Yeah.
at it. And then it can really stay in the background
Yeah.
and be moving well.
Yep.
Right. And there's so much stress in life, and it's such an important component. We don't want to have to manually operate it all the time.
Right.
We want it to get good. We want to work with it enough that your brain is like, oh, okay, I get this. Okay, we're going to do this a lot. All right, let's build a subconscious program for it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the heartbeat. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like where it's going to happen all the time, and we
Yep.
can count on it, and it just gets better and better so that we
Well,
can get those experiences.
yeah, and I think that that's such an important point too. I was thinking as you were talking about, there's a study done that when people looked at stress, a situation as being stressful in a negative way, it's going to make the cortisol rise, right? But if they were able to look at a situation as an exciting thing, so kind of flip the script on it being stressful, their DHEA actually raised, right? Which is not exactly antagonistic to cortisol, but kind of, right? DHEAs are sort of anti-aging hormone. And so it's a really, we want our DHEA just naturally diminishes as we age. We want more of it. So things like being able to shift in kind of like what you're talking about, I think, I don't know if resilience is the word exactly, but you're setting up this system to kind of process things in a, different way than it has. And it's like, that literally impacts your hormones,
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I know. I loved it when I found that study. I was like, oh, that's so fascinating, right? Because again, it goes, and this is the thing, I just want to add to that. A lot of people jump to mindset, and mindset I think is really important. But if you don't process the trauma, if you don't, you can't just like positive think your way out of things, right? It's like you have to have your body and your brain on board And then you can really instill that deeper mindset, in my opinion. Yeah.
No, you know what you can do with mindset work and positivity? You can create high performance, but you cannot create mental health and wellness.
Yes. Yes.
Mental health
That's a
and
great
wellness,
way of putting it. Yes.
mental health and wellness is created by the brain by processing both the positive and the negative, bringing those together. High performance, you can create, and this is why a lot of high performers are mentally ill and and you can tell by the lack of depth in their relationships,
Yeah.
the feeling of overwhelm and stress. You can tell these things, that they've got their mental filter so tightly and working so well, they will exclude all of the negative and only positive. And but they're moving, it's like the self is here and high performance is here, and they're getting up and they're getting farther away from themselves, and it's like this gap in between begins to create a tension, and then pretty soon they feel like they're going to break, which you are, because you're not supposed to be that far from yourself.
Right. Yeah.
But because when we come in here and we process the negative and our processor malfunctions, and it's like, well, why should I even try?
Yeah.
Because it's going to malfunction. If you're avoiding it already, your system is already evaluated that your processor doesn't work, and it doesn't. So let's get your processor up and processing.
Working. Yeah. Yep.
And let's just take a couple of little practices with some of these negative emotions that aren't going to spiral you out. And let's keep going until pretty soon brains say, well, I think I could do a little bit more, I think I could, what about this bigger one, and then you're working on that and you're growing this. And then pretty soon the brain is like, okay, what about this big one? And then now you're processing that, and it's just changes everything. And then people are noticing that they can have richer connections, because you can't have deep connections if yourself isn't there.
Of course. Yeah.
If your own way of being excludes yourself, you can't bring yourself to any your relationships. And then the people are saying, well, where are you? Why aren't you showing up? And you're like, I'm here. But no, you're not, because you have stayed away from a major part of yourself, which is the dark stuff, the heavy stuff, the stuff that is difficult to see or know or feel, right? So and if that stuff's kicking your butt your whole life, I mean, it's not supposed to be like that. It's part of our team, right? It's part of our wellness. And so I am a high performer. Like I am for that. That's why I didn't know I was mentally ill. So
I can speak from experience.
And I get a lot of clients that come in like this, and I know the rule is do not shake this boat. And I'm like, I hear the rules. Let's play by the rules, because we don't have to shake the boat to heal. We don't have to crumble into the abyss. But you know what? I also have clients that are in the abyss laying there, let's go. Let's look around this place, this abyss, and let's get it processed while we're here. And all of a sudden they start popping up into the positivity and growth and wellness and resilience and strength. And then they have both worlds, and that's what we want. We want our high performers that are totally detached from themselves to start not being so like the abyss is not going to kill anybody.
Right.
I mean, no, that's not true. The abyss does, but we can be skillful with the abyss, and there's rich wealth in there. Our self is in there.
All the beauty and the tragedy and all of that comes with it. And bringing it being whole. Oh, I love it. Such an amazing conversation. Oh my God, you brought so many good points out, and I'm so excited for everybody to hear this. So let them know where they can contact you.
Yeah, I am found best on my website, rachelmccloud.com. And my name is spelled like Rachelle, RACHELLEMCCLOUD, which I'm sure you'll have the link there. But if you're looking for me, that's me with all of the letters. And on there, you'll find my email list. You can jump on there. I have the 8-part curriculum, Inner World Transformation, that I've developed for resolving symptoms of anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress, and moving disorders into remission. That's there. And all sorts of goodies. And then my Facebook group is there. It's definitely a place where you can connect, and videos and YouTube and
all the good stuff. Sweet. We'll definitely have all the links in there so people can find you directly. So thank you again for being here today and sharing all of this incredible information and your story and everything. And I know that so many people are going to be inspired to really, maybe they have known for a little while that they need to tackle this, and now they're going to be ready. So appreciate that.
For having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
All right, you guys, I will see you next time.